From LateNighter.com, it's Inside Late Night with Mark Malkoff.
Hey everybody, Jon Schneider back here from Late Nighter, getting you set up for what you are about to listen to, which is another great interview on Inside Late Night. And this time our guest is Lizz Winstead, who is a fantastic stand-up comic who was producing the Jon Stewart Show, and that eventually led to the co-creation of The Daily Show. And she's going to tell Mark all about how that got started, the people that were hired at the beginning, and all of the work that she did to co-produce The Daily Show, among a lot of other amazing things that she's done throughout her career. So without further ado, I send you off to Mark Malkoff and Lizz Winstead.
Lizz Winstead, nice to see you.
Good to see you. I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like I've been screaming, which I maybe have been.
You might have happened. You sound great. You know, it's interesting to me because in terms of like I don't want to say it was a big break because you had been doing stand-up since December of 1983, but you're living in an apartment building. I'm guessing it's like 93, 94, and your neighbor just happened to be working at the Jon Stewart Show, and there was an opening. They said, would you be interested? And did you know this neighbor ahead of time, or were you doing your laundry next to them and you're just like, oh,
no.
Hey, I'm Lizz?
We moved in at the same time, and I think she knew me a little bit from stand-up, and John and I had done stand-up together. We actually wrote a pilot together, and we were friends. And so they had an opening as a segment producer on the Jon Stewart Show, which was the show that was the precursor to The Daily Show and stuff. And the dirty secret was I had no idea how to type. I never learned how to type. I wrote everything on longhand. In fact, I'm one of those people that like went out to buy a computer and ended up buying one of those like double person down-filled chairs instead, because I think I was in some kind of depression. And so my boyfriend at the time was a producer at CBS News, and he would come and meet me at the Jon Stewart Show and show me how to do exactly what I needed to do on the computer.
How did you get through college? Because you were doing stand-up. I know you
I paid people.
Oh my goodness.
To write my papers. I mean, I would send my papers and I would handwrite them and send them for someone to type them.
Unbelievable. So who was in your apartment building that told you about the gig? Was it Madeline Smithberg?
It was Madeline Smithberg. She lived below me.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And then you, of course, famously create The Daily Show together.
But even crazier about this building, before we even get to The Daily Show, On the Road, Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road in my building. And so in Madeline's apartment, but it didn't say that it was Madeline's apartment. She found out that it was her apartment through deep, deep diving. But all of these Jack Kerouac fans were constantly ringing our doorbell. 454 West 20th in Chelsea was the building. And Madeline lived on the second floor and I lived on the third floor. So they would buzz us constantly. Can we come into your apartment and see where Jack Kerouac read On the Road? And so we were so dumb that we didn't like charge money to let people into our apartments. Because since anybody didn't know, we were like, I'll just say it was mine. You could say it was yours and we'll figure it out. But yeah, isn't that wild? What a crazy story.
So you would let strangers just into the apartment. That's
I wanted to. We did not. We should have. We should have charged. Wow, but we did not.
Unbelievable. So you and Madeline in the same building. Is this when Jon Stewart was on MTV or Paramount syndicated or both?
It was just when the show got syndicated. So Madeline was at the show from the beginning when it was on MTV, and then when it moved to Paramount and got syndicated, that's when there was an opening for a segment producer, and I took the job. And then the show was unceremoniously canceled, and our bosses became the heads of Comedy Central. And John got locked up in a 2-year deal with Letterman, but they wanted to do a sort of newsy show and asked Madeline and I to come on board and do it. And the rest is history.
So you're living in the 20s, and then the studio, I think, is on like 26th Street, where you're doing the Jon Stewart Show. Who were some of the people that you booked on the show that might have not been famous at the time that became famous? Or who are some of the people that you might have stories with that you booked?
I would say I mean, we brought some weirdos, like, there was some, like, people from Minneapolis. Like, there was this crazy, polka band that I got to book to be the house on the Jon Stewart Show. People, when it was on MTV and Paramount, if people will remember, there was a new house band every night, and so we had this polka band on. There was this cult figure called Harvey Sid Fisher who sang songs from the Zodiac.
I know
Highly
who that
recommend.
is.
Put it in
Sure.
your show notes. We had Harvey Sid Fisher be the house band. But I mostly we had like I mean I got to segment produce George Clooney, which was really fun, and find out that he was a wild prankster. And in my research, and so I don't know that we discovered a lot of people. There was a lot of great musical acts who were like, super good underground musical acts that were on the show, but uh, we had heavy hitters on the show, and I think the problem with the Paramount show is that it was syndicated, and it's really hard to do a late night show when you don't have a network like machine backing you. When you're in syndication, you're kind of floating around, and the show was so funny, and the writers were so amazing, and yeah, I can't think of anyone that we discovered per se, but there was a ton of people who we were not short for A-list guests for sure.
Were there any Larry Sanders type moments behind the scenes that you can remember at the Jon Stewart Show, or anything just surreal or bizarre?
I don't think there was really any Larry Sanders moments. There was moments that I can't believe I did. Like, I was in a sketch. We did an NYPD Blue sketch, and if you'll remember the show, for the olds who are listening, NYPD Blue constantly showed Dennis Franz's ass in the show all the time. We saw his butt. I don't know why, but it was happening. So we did a sketch where it was me and another actor, and we just were we were like in a cop shop at the coffee machine, wearing no pants. It was just our butts and then our police shirts, and that was the sketch. And I was like, sure, I'll do that. I was like, what am I even doing? Um, but I don't know that there was any like Larry Sanders moments per se. I mean, I think it was funny because I think at the time, John was actually on Larry Sanders
He was, yes.
as like Larry Sanders being jealous of this upstart Jon Stewart, which was pretty funny. But like John was not Larry Sanders. John was
No.
very much, we were just all smoking and trying to not be self-loathing. Like that was kind of like our whole oeuvre of everybody, all the writers, everybody was just like, it's very self-deprecating. And, the show was a lot of fun, but I don't think there was any really, well, not true. I take it back. On our final shows, we did have somebody bring a condor on to the, like it's a condor, like a pet segment. And then the condor flew into the audience and started pecking at an audience member, which was kind of a bummer. And then we had, and I can't remember who the guest was, but they were doing something and they were holding a glass at the top of their hand, and they smashed the glass down and then started bleeding all over. I wish I could remember who that guest was. So we had so many mishaps, and when we got canceled by Paramount, I believe we did ransack the office pretty brutally, and I think we wrote like not great things on the walls as we left.
Wow. So then Doug Herzog gets to Comedy Central. How long does it? And he comes to you and says, "We want to do a show that's on nightly," and then you and Madeline develop it, or did Doug go?
Kind of.
Yeah.
So Madeline and I wanted to do this show about like the worst cable network in the world. And so we had come up with all these different shows, like there was a show like Friends, but it was animals that looked like the people in Friends, but you put peanut butter in their mouth and they talked, and just like really bad. And so he was like, yeah. Let's talk about that. So they put us under this development deal to develop that show. And then once we got there, he was like, okay, I don't want to do that show at all. Here's what I want the two of you to do. I want you to develop the show that's on every day. And I had just done 2 one-woman shows about the news, so this was like my wheelhouse. I'd never created a show like this, but the one thing that, I knew was that the show, if it was a parody of the news, people were so disgusted by the media. And I knew that because I'd been on stage talking about it. And so everybody agreed, let's try and do it where if you had the sound turned down, you might not think this wasn't a news show. And then Herzog did the unheard of where he said, I will give you a show and we're not going to do a pilot. I'm going to give you a year to develop it on the air, which is like, I think only The Simpsons ever got that deal. So we got to make mistakes. And then I advocated for and was proven wrong instantly. They went with me. They indulged me for like, I think, I don't even know if we went to air with this idea. We test showed it. No audience.
I remember it was the first couple months. I had heard that Doug was wanted to try an audience, and you and Madeline were very much against it. And
yeah, we wanted it to be like, let the audience be smart enough to get it. And that was a flop instantly. Madeline and I were both like, oh, wow, that was a really bad idea. Let's get an audience like immediately.
Because Doug apparently he said, let's just do a test audience. We don't have to air it. And that you and Madeline were instantly like, he's right.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I'm sure it helped Craig a lot doing that. And then the Kilborn hire was completely Herzog, correct?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. Madeline and I got all the correspondence, and we plucked a lot of people from news, people that we knew were funny from news editors, people who were writing some news, some comedians who were writers. But yeah, we really needed people who could help us really execute the genre. And Brian Unger was the person who was instrumental in creating the tone and the look and the feel for the Daily Show correspondent and the Daily Show field pieces.
That's what I was going to say. It's such a smart hire because he has all this experience. And tell me if I have this right. He actually taught all the correspondents how to do everything from lighting the interview,
100%,
where the camera is, and just the gravitas of being a correspondent.
3-point lighting. It was incredible to watch him understand so profoundly from producing and then being on-air talent in the news. I mean, when I approached him, so Brian was the one who taught me how to use the computer because he and I dated for years and then became friends. And so the thing about it was, when I went to him, he was so like just up to his eyeballs in having to cover the OJ trial and the Menendez trial and all this other shit that he was like, what has happened to news? So when this opportunity had happened, he in college was Madeline's intern at Letterman, super weird. And then I became, connected to Brian. And I said, would you ever leave news? It's a year opportunity. I don't know what's going to happen. You could fuck yourself forever going back to news. And he was like, I don't care. And it was awesome.
Yeah, he was so good at it. At what point did you notice that you had a super fan, Chris Larson, that was showing up every taping? Because, I worked actually on a bunch of TV shows and audience coordinator. And almost every show we would have somebody, a regular that would come. But there was this super fan, Chris Larson. And what happened?
So Chris he's that kid. If you were a nerd in high school, Chris and his friend came to tapings all the time. They were so smart, and they were kids that you just wanted to say, you're going to have the best life when you are in college and you're far ahead of the curve, and all these jocks and all these shitheads at your school are just losers. And so I know it's hard for you to understand that, but like I totally see it in you. So what happened was Chris came and then Chris asked me to go to prom with him.
And you got stood up in 1979. It was a hockey
Oh,
player with a mullet, and he
my hockey
stands you
player
up.
mulleted, yes, stood me up. So I was like, I'm going to prom with Chris Larson, and I'm going to wear this bombshell gown, and I'm going to go to prom. I'm not going to go to prom just for the show. We're going to prom. And I went to meet him. His parents were hilarious. So I go to his house, and like his parents take me in the bathroom, and they like gave me some shots, and they were like, "You are so nice. This is so great." The parents were really funny. And then we went to dinner. We danced the whole time at the prom. Like it was really fun. And like going in the bathroom with screaming girls who had booze just taped up their legs. And like, I was like, oh my God, this is so classic.
You're 35, he's 18, and then it was filmed and shown on the show.
And then it was filmed and shown on the show. Yeah. Yeah. It was really funny. And like, it was just really fun for him. And he was wearing this goofy tux. And I was just happy to be able to have Chris Larson have a prom date who was on TV. And, I wore a red dress. We danced to Lady in Red at the prom together. And just to like give a really sweet, cool nerd, some comeuppance, like some John Hughes movie. It's Weird Science, but with me, and not that I'm
Kelly
not
LeBrock, you're the same person. You
not
get
quite
mistaken
Kelly
for her.
LeBrock, but it was really fun. It was really, really fun.
Do you know what happened to Chris years later? This is 25,
Oh,
27 years later, or something like
I
that.
think like years ago, I think we connected on Twitter, like back in the day, like 10 years ago. And I think he's like a really cool graphic designer or is doing something. But what I remember was that he totally like lived up to his whole potential. And I think
That's
he's had
very
a
good.
great life.
I
Yeah.
love that he, because it was a really small audience. Were there any guests that were on the show that you went backstage to say hello to that you were fans of? I mean, there's so many iconic people that were on that show, especially early on when you had trouble getting guests, some older comedians, actors.
I mean, Bill Murray was like, that
That
was
was
kind
a
of
big
big
coup.
get.
What was Murray like working with him?
I mean, he was a great guest. My exciting Bill Murray story was while I was at Comedy Central, I did this wild sort of A&E biography parody called Milo: Death of a Supermodel, and it was like an amalgam of all of the tragic supermodel stories rolled into one. Kind of throw Nancy Spongeon's life in there. It's like the ups, the downs, the whole thing. And the night it aired, I got a call. I wasn't home. I was at a watch party, and Bill Murray got my number somehow and left a message on my answer machine and said, I spell my name with 2 Z's. And he goes, Lizz Winstead, you are very funny. And then that was it. It was like, oh my God. Very
No
exciting.
phone number or anything.
Not call me back. Just like, this is Bill Murray. You are very funny. And I was like, oh my God, floored.
It was so interesting when you launched The Daily Show in 96 because you only have CNN, but then really quickly it's MSNBC, July, and then I believe Fox News is October.
Mm-hmm.
The timing was unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. And it really was, when we launched the show, it was really sort of, there was like a jillion news magazines on television at that point, and they were just struggling for stories. So it would be like, your mattress, what you don't know might kill you, and there was that and local news. And so when we launched, it was really looking at like evening news magazines, and that. And then once the cable explosion happened, we followed the trends of the news and then mocked them. And so, things shifted dramatically on how it went. And so it was really almost made the job easier just to see how low cable could go. And they certainly did with the trial of the century of the moment and all the other garbage they covered instead of actual news. And we just like were there following it.
You said when you were developing the show, there were two different camps. One had pop culture, the other focused on politics. So it was kind of a little. When you were there, it was a little bit of both. And then Jon Stewart, of course, took over and went more politics.
Yeah.
How hard was that? I know that you wanted more politics, but was that pressure on the network? Was that a hard thing? Would they were the ones that wanted more the pop culture?
They
correct?
wanted more pop culture, and it was always a fight, and I was always pushing back, and I'm sure they didn't find me at all fun to work with. But I kept saying, if we're going to shit on pop culture constantly, you're not going to get guests, and no one's going to remember that because pop culture isn't changing our world. You know, the reason that this show made sense to me was that the people who were supposed to be keeping us informed were choosing to do lascivious stories about celebrity and that, or just like, if it bleeds, it leads chaos, and holding them accountable in a way is more fun. And then they lighten it up with celebrities who do movies and have them on, and maybe have them even comment on the state of our media. And it was a very much push me, pull you kind of thing.
I give you credit. At one point, was the network? I had been told by somebody that the network was considering to fire you, and there were staff members that signed a petition in your defense saying that if this does happen, we're out of here. Did that happen?
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that happened, and I was utterly surprised by the whole thing. And God bless the staff. It was like it's one of those things where I always would say to them, look, I can't promise that we're going to get every joke we love on the air, but I promise you I will fight for the jokes that we think are good. And like having a boss that at least will try to fight for that and not just back down, I think they really liked that. And I think that the writers were definitely in a camp where, they wanted to skewer the true titans, crapping on celebrities, or, especially if a celebrity's like a big drunk or has a thing or a public whatever. That just was never kind of my jam. And so I was like, didn't you bring me in to kind of like do this thing that I do? And it turns out, yeah. And then, Craig wanted more pop culture. I think that was his jam. And I think that was a widely known, butting of heads. And so I'm glad that when Jon finally took over, that the show went in a direction that it was meant to be in.
Other than Craig Kilborn pushing for the pop culture, it must have been, I'm guessing, I could be off, a dream for a comedy writer to have a host that was so indifferent and just would do whatever you told them. Whereas traditionally, those hosts are so opinionated that they reject so much. And it's like sometimes for people to get stuff on is very hard. But this was like you could do whatever you want. Was that was a gift, I'm guessing? Did you feel that way?
Yeah, on some level it was great because it was, Craig looked like every handsome local news anchor, right? So his like fit the bill. And so in writing satirically for that person, people would often be like, is he in on it or is he not in on it? And I felt like that was part of the magic of Craig as the host. And, and so the show, in those first couple of years was very much more how the Colbert Report was, with everybody was a character. And so when Craig left and Jon took over, and I think this was a good move, Jon became sort of the voice of the audience, and then the correspondents remained the clowns, so that he could be like, wait, that can't be right. He could say what you were thinking as the viewer, which I think really elevated the tone of the show.
Who had the best out of all the anchors? Maybe Unger, since he had the experience, but who had the best audition that you remember, or one or two of the people that were correspondents that you hired?
You know, Unger didn't even audition. In
That
fact,
makes sense because I mean he had the chops and he could do it. Wow. Okay.
yeah. You know, when I think about who auditioned, it's like I think we went and saw people doing other work. And then, we knew Lewis Black was going to be the Andy Rooney. So that didn't need to be an audition. It was like, you already are Andy Rooney. So just do you in 3 minutes about a topic. So that was that, right? Beth Littleford, we saw her doing literally a one-woman show about how to enjoy anal sex. And she had this great look of a fresh-faced celebrity reporter.
Beth
And
was so good. I'm sorry to
so
interrupt.
good.
Beth was criminally underrated, and I think one of the best to do it. I
She
really
was so
do.
good, especially in those Barbara Walters type of, that's the way to play up celebrity, have celebrities on and have them in on it and playing up to all the tropes of the celebrity biography. Beth was brilliant at
She
it.
did it really well, and I remember the late David Cassidy not getting it and actually being kind of upset, and she on air said if you ask that again, she was asking about something, that he was known for, and I don't know, something sexual, and she's like, you asked that again, I'm leaving," and he wasn't kidding, and it was like, she had no idea that that was gonna happen, but
Right, right.
yeah.
So, and Whitney was always so dry that Brian and Whitney shared an office, which was the best thing and the worst thing to happen, those two together in a
Why?
room.
Whitney Brown, SNL. Why with Whitney? Why did him and Unger clash?
Oh, they didn't clash.
Oh,
Oh, they were co-conspirators of the craziest order. Look out. The two of them would scheme up shit that was so wild that you just look out. Yeah. So I think Brian really guided Whitney and got him to a place to learn how to have those fake broadcaster chops. Yeah. And then the two of them together were just trouble on ice in a funny way.
Whitney, from what I've told from people that worked with him, one of the smartest guys, but seems a little self-destructive. Certainly at SNL with drugs, and then do you think that that's fair to say, a self-destructive guy?
I mean, I would say that Whitney just, I don't even know how to describe Whitney. Self-destructive means that you land in the gutter. And Whitney just made decisions. And then if it didn't go his way, he would just pivot. Right now, he's like, I saw him about 4 years ago. He's living in Austin, Texas, married to a wonderful woman, like doing some farming. She's a musician named Carolyn Wonderland. She's an incredible blues musician. And he's just living his best life. So I feel like Whitney is the kind of person who has so many like proclivities, interests, whatever, that I think he likes to get in trouble. And I don't think that he cares where that trouble takes him, because I think he thinks it's fun, because he also can just land someplace else and be really happy. And I think that that's who Whitney is.
If you don't want to answer this, you don't have to. But I was told that you brought Whitney to Air America, and he needed a gig, and that he tried to fire you. Is that true, to get you fired?
Whitney?
Yeah.
Um, I've heard that rumor also,
Okay.
but I haven't confirmed it.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah.
you never know. I was just like, okay, talk about loyalty if that's true. If that's true, I'm
Yeah,
saying,
yeah. I mean, I think Air America was its own ball of
I
wax.
can't imagine, because the individual who started it basically told you they had all this money and it wasn't true, and that was
Right.
the big thing that sank it, correct?
Yeah.
You need
Well,
money.
it didn't sink it. It was the first, because it went on for like 4 years after the huge scandal. There's a whole documentary that you can watch about it. But yeah, this guy, Evan Cohen, said that he had money, didn't have money. All of a sudden, the affiliates weren't getting paid. Our health insurance wasn't being covered. We weren't getting paid. Several people were paying. I was paying my own staff with my money. And yeah,
So you're
it
writing
was
checks out to Rachel Maddow?
not to Rachel. She was getting paid, but lower staff was not getting paid. And so it was wild.
I can't believe this.
Yeah. And then they had new people come in that salvaged it for a while. But I mean, I got fired. Mark Maron got fired. I'll never forget. I was there, and it was, I don't know, 3 years in or something. And this new guy took over named Danny Goldberg. And he sent one of his lieutenants in to tell me that I was fired. Almost all of the writers were fired. And then Marin was fired like 3 months later because, get this, humor wasn't an effective tool for social change.
My God.
And my show was replaced with Jerry Springer. And Rachel Maddow was moved to 5 a.m. And my other co-host, Chuck D, was moved to the weekends so that Jerry Springer could be one of the marquee talk show hosts on Air America.
Former mayor of Cincinnati. The decisions on that, it's unbelievable. I have to see that documentary. Hank Gallo gave you attribution when you were talking about Boutros Ghali talking to Craig Kilborn. Can you tell the story about how Craig just was like, no, this is wrong in the script. This guy's name is repeated twice, Boutros Ghali, and what you said, if you remember.
Yes. So there was a journalist in the room, and I never wanted press in the joke reads. It was like my thing. It's like no media in the joke reads. It's a bad idea. Like you just don't want to expose anybody to that. Yeah. So journalist in there, Craig's reading the script. He stops and he goes, there's an error in the script. It says Boutros Ghali. Why do we have to say Boutros twice? And then I said, for the same reason you say Sirhan twice, thinking, and then he stared at me and I said, Duran? And he goes, oh, okay. And I was like, oh my God.
He literally was not reading the newspaper. I mean, he wasn't following what was going on other than the sports section.
I mean, and pop culture. But that was just one of those things where it's like, oh gosh, don't come sliding in here with massive indignance. It's always a bummer. Yeah.
I have to say, in terms of getting over with the audience, he really crushed it in terms of the audience response in the studio, the laughs, and that the 5-question thing. It really, I mean, I think people forget sometimes because he's been gone for a while, how hard he was crushing it, at least for Letterman, for them to bring him in at 12:30.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely had it. You know, if you were going to keep with the Daily Show remaining satire throughout, the dude was really good at. He could read prompter even if he did. Like he's a savant at reading prompter, and he could tell timing even if he didn't quite understand what he was reading. It was incredible.
And I remember Hank Gallo wrote a joke when Mike Myers was on for Kilborn, which was a perfect Kilborn joke, which is one of the 5 questions for Mike Myers. Canada, what went wrong?
Yeah.
That's, I mean, so Kilborn.
Yeah.
And it just, the audience to have that character. But I guess maybe that was partly Craig as a person. I don't know. Was he kind of like the same type person on and off?
Very much. Yeah. He was very much, he was very much like he's Minnesota sarcastic. Like he's
where you're
from Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah, you're both from Minnesota.
Yeah. And so I mean he had that sarcastic thing down, and that was his humor ticket for sure.
I know that you're asked about this sometimes with the Daily Show. With there weren't women writers, but I mean, you've said 40% of the staff were women. And when you got your first 150 submissions, and I think Madeline said the same thing, it was like
2 women,
yes.
2 or 3.
And you
Yes.
cover the names up. At least back then, how it went is they would cover up names and just go with whoever.
Yeah, who had the best packages. Yeah. And
Wow.
so, and so that was like, it's, and since that time, it's changed a lot. It was also one of those things where, in the scope of the kind of comedy that everybody was writing and submitting for, there was so few shows doing, and there was no shows doing straight up political humor. And so a lot of people weren't, forget about women, no, hardly anyone was honing their skills at writing political packets at the time. People were writing sitcom packets, late night packets, and this was not a late night packet show. It was a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can even think about like comics back in the day who were women who were doing political material, like straight up, it was me, and like then there was like Kate Clinton, and there was, some other comics who didn't submit,
Like Stephanie Miller. I mean, maybe
Stephanie Miller wasn't even doing stand-up back then, I don't think.
she wasn't doing stand up. She had a late night show, short-lived late night show at one point.
Was it back in the 90s then?
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah. Tom Hurst was a writer, and I know you worked with Tom at the Jon Stewart Show.
Yeah. So didn't come through, didn't submit.
Yeah, but there weren't many, so it makes that does.
So,
make
it
sense,
was just a weird genre where people were like, I'm not sure if this is my thing. Also, it's a new show, so I don't, it was just like, it was very bizarre. And, I've just always been really a political person and tried to mash those things together, and never thought that my first big opportunity in television would be my dream show, which is a curse and a blessing, I guess. But because you don't know what you're doing, so you make mistakes and you get mad about things, and people aren't caring enough, and
I'm glad that they gave you a year. I mean, it's people forget Colbert when we're recording this just won the Emmy yesterday, but that first year he got with the press and the comments from from America were like, this is the biggest mistake. He's going to get canceled. He's in third place, and it's just like that first year for most people, unless, Letterman had guest hosted for Carson like 100 sometimes and had the morning show fail and had all this experience. So February of 82, when he gets the gig, he's polished and ready to go. But like for most people, you need that year to figure that thing out.
Well, it's true. And, especially when Stephen had come from this character.
Sure.
And like, the world didn't know
They had
how
no idea.
brilliant he was,
No
how
idea.
funny he was as him, because he had introduced himself to the world in character throughout, not just Daily Show, throughout all of his great stuff, right?
Sure. Is it true that you and Madeline don't get residuals for The Daily Show?
It is true.
That's unbelievable. that because they
It
spelled your
is
name
true.
in the credits and stuff. I can't
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah, it was a non-union show
I'm
at the
so
time.
sorry. I can't believe that. Yeah, that's unbelievable. What was it like doing an evening at the Improv with Phyllis Diller when she was the host?
Oh my gosh, that was, that show was always a crapshoot, right? So it was like you could get a guest, you could get a host who was semi-famous, maybe another comic, maybe a whatever. And so you never knew. And so when I got Phyllis Diller, I was like, oh my God. I mean,
Icon.
what an icon. And to be able to also, for the youngsters who don't know Phyllis Diller, her laugh was so iconic.
Yeah.
And to be on stage telling your jokes and having Phyllis Diller laughing at all of them, like that was one of the greatest things ever.
I love to hear that. I know Ben Vereen also was one of the hosts when you were at Evening at
Yes,
Improv.
Ben Vereen.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I would have had more. I'm a huge musical nerd.
Yeah.
And I didn't come into Bob Fosse till I was till after that and later.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was a blessing because I think I would have been stopped dead in my tracks if I would have the admiration that I have for Ben Vereen now. Then I think I wouldn't have
Yeah.
been able to do my act.
Wow. Yeah, different place. You mentioned Phyllis Diller loving your material. You opened up for Roseanne, same thing. She heard your set and she thought you were hilarious. What was that like?
So that was wild. So the Roseanne story was interesting because I was still Minneapolis is where I started comedy, and a lot of people don't know that Minneapolis is such an incredible back in the 80s, an incredible hub of comedy. And so there was like 6 rooms and national headliners would come through and work at a club for, 4 nights, 5 nights. And if you got to open for them, you got to know them more and more. And so you could really create relationships and develop your material totally under the radar of having to go to LA and then bombing in front of like an agent and then having your whole career be screwed, right?
Wow.
So Roseanne was still living in Denver. And so she would come through 4 times a year and headline in Minneapolis. And so we became friends and I opened for her. And now she turned into a massively horrible individual. And it was like, what is wrong with you? And I haven't talked to her for years, ever since she came out against trans people and became Trumpy. And like, I don't know what the hell happened, but she was like one of the greatest comedians of our time. And
At
now
the
she's
time when
just a
she
mess.
debuted on Carson and got her sitcom and, longevity at the time. You did say The Daily Show. I know that you mentioned in an interview about Jon Stewart when he interviewed Henry Kissinger, going easy on him. You did, and I give you a lot of credit. You had John on your radio show on Air America, and you basically said your words. He's a war criminal. And what did John say when you kind of gently and politely?
I don't remember. I remember talking to him about it, but I don't remember what he said.
I think he said something like, "Liz, I'm just not you."
Oh,
But I don't think he really didn't get into it, I don't think,
yeah,
on
I
there,
don't
but
think we got
you.
into it. No, but yeah, I remember being like, wow. But um, I think, I mean, that was so early on. That was like 2004. And when you look at John now, and I don't think he's fearless now. I think he
It definitely,
understands.
yeah,
I think
I
he
would agree.
understands that, like, if you're, there's no reason to sit in a chair and talk to someone um, who is full of shit or horrible um, and not hold them accountable.
Sure,
Because then the point becomes, why am I sitting across from this person? If I know that they have things to answer for, and I know that I am skilled to hold their feet to the fire, I should do that. Otherwise, I'm just platforming them and normalizing the shit that they influence people with every day. And I think that, like, there's been clips of John interviewing gun people and like Congress people, I think, or state senators.
he goes after them. I mean, he'll rip them apart. I mean, to sit down with that
Yes,
guy and
and
try to
force them
debate
to.
him.
Yes, and I'm super appreciative of that.
Yeah. It was very public when you left The Daily Show in January of 1998. Craig Kilborn was in Esquire and said some awful stuff and mentioned your name. Looking back, do you have any regrets leaving the show?
I mean, I don't know. It was a time, and I recently just did a podcast with Doug Herzog, who was my boss at the time. He had a podcast called Basic, where he said, that was the worst decision I ever made was letting you go. And I was like, you know what?
Today
It
he would have
was
been fired. He would have been fired. Today he was suspended for 1 week without pay, they said in the news.
it was 1996,
Mm.
and watching the environment unfold, one of the things that I knew to be true was that um, I would not have been able to operate professionally for my staff with knowing that somebody said those things about me publicly. And so I don't regret leaving because I don't think I would have added to positivity to that environment.
Did he ever apologize? Did Kilborn ever apologize to you?
I mean, I think he had to. I mean,
Yeah.
but
He had to, but it wasn't.
No, in a way that I felt like, let's put this behind us and move on. No.
Okay. Did you, in terms of when Jon Stewart took over, did you have any other people that you thought would have been a good host other than Jon if Jon didn't get the gig? I know a bunch of people auditioned. I didn't know if you had any input.
I mean, Brian Unger.
Yeah, he's very funny. Yeah.
Brian Unger.
He did
Jon,
some Leno. Yeah.
I think if one of the people that Madeline and I loved when we were initially hiring was Mike Rowe.
Oh yeah. He tested.
And he was really funny, and we were hoping that he would have been the host, but then Doug wanted Craig. I mean, I think Jon would have been our first choice, hands down, heading up and tied up at Letterman. And it would be interesting to see what that show would have been like from the jump had Jon been the host, because we wouldn't have needed to have a satirical host. I think Jon would have been in much more of a leadership role and a creative role, because that's how his brain works.
Very hands-on, as opposed to Craig, which is just give me the prompter and turn him in, I'll read it.
Definitely, yeah. And so, not really. It's kind of like, yeah, Jon for the win.
You started doing stand-up in December of '83 in Minneapolis at Dudley Riggs was your first gig. But you didn't really start doing the political comedy until like the Desert War, correct?
I was doing like I would do like jokes about sexism and certainly social commentary on like women in the world and things like that. But the real crux of me really understanding, because I was always political, but like making those ties between the media and politics was really when that first Gulf War began, and knowing how lied to we were by the media and that they were just reading press releases and all of that stuff was really something that was like, I cannot believe what a dumpster fire it is that we're being fed bullshit. And so that's when it really all started for me. Yeah. So it kind of, the transition really happened to go, and which meant sort of reinventing a whole new audience. Like some people like, no politics. And then other people were like, who's she? She's funny. I like politics. And so it was a long slog to develop a new audience and then nurture the people who wanted more of that social political commentary. So like 92 or 1, or I don't even remember when the first Gulf War at this point was. 92?
I thought it was the first one was like around 90, 91.
91, I think. Yeah, I think it was 91. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it a tough sell for your mother to put her on The Daily Show and do the recurring bit with her? Or did she just love doing it?
Well, what happened was it was an accident, because what we wanted to do was we wanted to have Final Jeopardy on the show, but we wanted to have it but we were trying to figure out like how to do it. And like, of course we didn't think like they're going to tell you to stop doing it. Like, what are you even doing? And so it was like, how can we do it? And it was like, oh, Jeopardy's on early in Minnesota, because it was in syndication. So my mom will watch it and then she'll tell us what it is. And then she could not help herself. She would call up and be like, all right, so the answer is John, I don't know how to say his name. It's RLL, whatever. And then she just would like always be like hilarious. And she'd be like, by the way, give your sister a call. She feels like her ovaries are about to blow up. And then she'd go, bye. And so the people that would, the researchers who would have to transcribe it would always play it for us and we'd be laughing. So we were like, what if we just run that and do it? And so we did it for a couple of times. Then, of course, we got the cease and desist from Jeopardy. Then we got my dad into the act, who would threaten Alex Trebek. And we came up with a new name for it called Trivial Compromise. And then she would just find questions. And then my dad would give a preface on every one to say, Trebek, I'm coming for you.
It's
For
really fun.
fucking with my wife, Jenny. Here's the final compromise, or whatever it was. And then she would read it.
In terms of when you were doing the clubs in the 80s, when you were doing New York clubs in the 80s or so, what was like the best stand-up, like one or two stand-up sets that you remember seeing of like people that were starting out that you were just blown away with people that you were like, damn, they're going to be huge? Was there anyone that stands out?
Well, I would say, I don't know if I thought they would be huge, but like my favorite, Dana Gould has always been and always probably will be one of my favorite comics of all time.
His podcast, yeah, he's fantastic. And
right?
I know he almost got Saturday Night Live at one point, and you would think that,
yeah,
I mean, he's just
he's just a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
We were roommates. He's a dear friend. He's somebody who I was always like, could not wait to see.
Yeah.
Maria Bamford is somebody, also
Yes.
a fellow Minnesotan, who I think might be the greatest living comedian, maybe the greatest comic of all time. I'm not sure, but so great. Other comics I always really loved. Are you talking about back in the day?
Sure.
Okay. Jake Johansson was somebody who I really just loved. Kevin Meaney, rest in peace. One of the funniest comics like ever.
He was great on Carson. I remember his Carson.
Oh my God, just so funny. Yeah, those are my like.
You mentioned Dana Gould was your roommate. Wasn't Janine Garofalo a roommate of yours?
Yeah, Janine was one of my roommates too.
When was
also
that?
Brilliant. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. Yeah, just like rooming around,
Must have been a fun time.
Yeah, it was crazy. The times, Dana in San Francisco, and then Janine in LA, and then I crashed with both of them when they were both living in Boston a lot. Slept on a lot of couches, of both Dana and Janine, and yeah.
Do you go back sometimes? Like, did they have you back Jon Stewart's final show, for example? Did they invite you back sometimes since you created the template?
No, I didn't go. I was not asked back until Sarah Silverman guest hosted in 2023, and she had me on as her first guest.
What was that like?
It was wild because it was a different studio.
Sure.
And it was very emotional, to be there and to see some of the old folks that I knew, a lot of people I didn't know. But it was very menschy of her to want to be able to have me on the show, and B, have me on the show to talk about what I'm doing now, which is, advocating for abortion access and using humor to do that. And so it was very cool.
Yeah, I know that Sarah was very involved in everything you've done. But I'm really glad that you came full circle and got to be on the show. I mean, it's amazing. You're in Brooklyn now these days, right? LA's not
No, I'm in Brooklyn.
It's very cool. Lizz Winstead, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. On Apple Podcasts, please rate it and leave a review. Be sure to go to latenighter.com for all your late night TV news. And you can find my podcast at latenighter.com/podcasts. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.